Hello, everyone, and welcome back to True Crime Design. Today's episode is going to be a little different than our normal format, but it will definitely be informative and hopefully of value. So, I recently picked up this book, While Idaho Slept, written by J. Reuben Appelman. It was on sale for $13.49 on Amazon, so I figured why not and went ahead and ordered it. I wasn't expecting much, and it really did read like a Dateline special and was definitely biased towards the town and the university and also the police department. It's definitely written from the perspective of someone who believes in Koberger's guilt. Unfortunately, it is kind of a puff piece for Moscow and the university. That being said, there was a good amount of information in there, factual information, details about key players involved here, as well as references to events that I went ahead and researched further to kind of get a better picture of. And I gotta say, I did learn from reading this book. So there was value in it for sure. Definitely worth $13.49. So I pulled out some quotes and information that I hadn't heard of or that I just feel is not really talked about when it comes to this case, and I think warrants further discussion. So consider this the Cliff Notes version without the details that we've heard a million times and have ingrained in our memory at this point. The first quote I want to bring to your attention is this one. Quote, Green's University of Idaho was not the biggest public university in Idaho, but it was the oldest and the one with the most political and social clout in the state, end quote. There is sort of this feeling around the University of Idaho that I get, at least, just in the way they make decisions and the rhetoric they use. It does feel like they have this air of self-importance and an almost Machiavellian attitude. They make decisions rarely, if ever, asking for public input. They are not transparent. They certainly lack regard for the safety of residents and students. And allegedly, in my opinion, there is an organized crime network actually running this area. I know I posted this on my community page, but I don't think I talked about it in a video. But there was this study done in August 2023. So this would be the August after the murders. And it says Idaho's 4 college and university presidents spent about $150,000 traveling over a 12-month span from June of 22 to June of 23. That's how much was spent on travel between the 4 presidents. Idaho State University's president Marlene Tromp and University of Idaho president Scott Green both outspent Governor Brad Little's travels, who racked up $48,216 in travel bills. Meanwhile, the ever-important President Scott Green racked up a $50,939 travel bill. And the university responded saying that most of that money comes from donors. So Green used slightly more than $46,000 from a President's Reserve Fund, which was composed entirely of donor dollars. The remaining travel costs, they say, slightly less than $5,000 came from taxpayer funds, which I think is ridiculous because this man makes $440,000 annually from the University of Idaho. Pay for your own damn flights. And it looks like he just flew around the state of Idaho for graduations and ceremonies and whatnot. But the prestigious president did take a trip to Washington, D.C. on April 11th. This was 1 month before U of I abruptly went public with their $685 million plan to acquire the for-profit online university, University of Phoenix, which has a checkered reputation, to say the least. So this was a very controversial decision that there was even some recent litigation regarding. At the end of January, a judge dismissed the state attorney general's lawsuit, alleging that the deal was done in violation of an open meetings law, basically green-lighting the university's plan. The university said it would be moving forward with the unpopular acquisition. Following this ruling, Idaho State Board of Education member Rod Lewis raised several red flags in the purchase and voices them here in this recent opinion piece in the Idaho Statesman. Lewis writes, quote, The Idaho State Board of Education surprisingly has allowed U of I to move forward on this deal with no public meetings. State Board mandates disclosure for matters far less significant. Yet, the State Board has refused to hold public meetings, debate, and discussion about the biggest change in the history of Idaho's higher education system. The writer continues, as for obtaining the approval of the Idaho legislature, the U of I is basically stiff-arming them. The U of I's unwillingness to submit to legislative approval is based on an age-old and legally questionable argument that the U of I is a constitutionally independent entity, not subject to regulation by the Idaho legislature. Given the size of this deal, what else could the U of I do without legislative approval? The problem with U of I's assertion is that its own course of action and behavior over the course of its history undermines its argument. It defies logic that legislative approval would be required to support UI's primary funding, but approval would not be required for an acquisition of a new university larger than Idaho's entire university system, involving one of the biggest debt offerings in the history of the state. Another reason U of I justifies its unwillingness to be subject to public scrutiny is its assertion that its purchase of Phoenix is basically risk-free to the U of I and the state of Idaho. This, too, is subject to significant debate. Phoenix's reputational problems alone create a substantial risk. They are so well known they are almost synonymous with Phoenix's name. Unfortunately, Phoenix's brand, which is best known for hard sell student loan tactics, fraud, government fines, and shareholder lawsuits, is more prominent than the U of I's brand and risks overshadowing U of I's positive academic image. On the financial side, anyone involved in corporate acquisitions knows a $550 million corporate purchase based on leveraging the acquired business for $685 million in debt carries significant risk. The details of this deal matter. Unfortunately, without public meetings and debate and the usual legislative approval process, the details are not well understood. To purchase Phoenix, the U of I proposes to leverage Phoenix's own cash flow and assets to obtain the $685 million needed to pay for Phoenix in what is called a leveraged buyout. Phoenix will issue a $685 million in corporate bonds anticipated to be rated as high risk or speculative bonds. The U of I hopes to insulate the U of I from Phoenix's debt by creating a separate nonprofit company named 4-3 to buy Phoenix, but there are numerous reasons for concern regardless of the structure. For one, 4-3 will be owned 100% by the U of I Board of Regents. Perhaps most concerning is U of I's plan to take the $10 million plus in cash from Phoenix each year. This appears to be one of the primary reasons and benefits for U of I to do the deal. But for all the benefit in the near term, taking cash from Phoenix is likely the most damaging when it comes to insulation from Phoenix's debts. The U of I responds to these risks by stating that Phoenix's current financials can do more than cover the debt service and any other ongoing risks of the business. The author continues, one of the more troubling aspects of this deal is U of I's lack of transparency and disclosure of Phoenix's financial status. Unlike corporate deals of this magnitude where multi-year full financial statements are provided to stakeholders, the U of I has provided only a one-page summary income sheet and no balance sheet or any other information regarding Phoenix's liabilities. One without the other is insufficient at best and misleading at worst. For example, the U of I repeatedly refers to Phoenix having $200 million in cash. Without knowing Phoenix's liability, this reference is of limited use. Basically, we only have U of I's word for Phoenix's financial status. In fulfilling its duties to Idaho taxpayers, U of I merely states it has done its due diligence. Where have we heard that before, folks? Where have we heard that? Just trust us. Without any proof or without any evidence, just trust us and don't ask any questions.
We believe it was a targeted attack. I mean, to be honest, you're going to have to trust us on that at this point, because we're not going to release why we think
Please
that.
don't get distracted by the conspiracy theories, and I'll just be perfectly blunt. The nonsense that some people put out there just to stir the pot.
The writer continues, despite U of I's repeated assurances, there is no such thing as little or no risk when it comes to corporate acquisitions and debt offerings. The U of I should be upfront about this. The risk involved in this deal is very high. The U of I seems to be doing everything it can to avoid public scrutiny of this transaction. Why? We know best. Trust us. There is no risk, is its mantra. Typically, when I hear these words, huge red flags go up. I don't think I am alone. No transaction of this size, scope, and risk should be allowed to occur without public meetings and legislative approval. Only one-sided, self-serving information streams, guest editorials, a frequently asked questions website, and one-sided presentations. End quote. Again, our way or shut the fuck up. Not accountable to the people or the law. This acquisition is a perfect example of the aforementioned social and political clout that the university enjoys. And it makes one wonder if the same social and political leverage was used to cover up the massacre and use the same tactics to gaslight and obfuscate. They probably used connections to secure complicit state and federal agents, $1 million directly to the university, and ultimately securing Koberger as a patsy. Well, that was a bit of a rant. Anyway, back to the book. So I didn't realize that the governor of Idaho is actually a Vandal and a Moscow native. Quote, the popular Republican governor of Idaho, Brad Little, had been in regular contact with the state police and had made $1 million funding pledge for expenses related to the investigation. Little had been raised on his family's sheep and cattle ranching operation and had studied agribusiness at the University of Idaho. His connection to the people of Moscow went back half a century, end quote. Yep, you heard that. The governor graduated in the University of Idaho class of 1976, and he was a brother of the Phi Delta Theta fraternity. And get this, that's the same fraternity that Hunter Johnson belonged to. Hunter Johnson, the 911 caller who reportedly found the bodies. So I made this visual to keep track of all these characters who happen to have graduated from the University of Idaho. So when we have the lead investigator, the police chief, the coroner, the mayor, the prosecutor, the university president, the judge, the governor, and even the defense attorney, all went to the school where this happened. Coupled with all this courtroom fuckery and investigative bias, it's obvious that there is collusion happening in this case. It's all just for show to protect the university and make the bad press go away, all while denying the truth and justice to the victims and citizens. It's honestly disgraceful. The next thing I want to talk about here is an event that happened in 2021 involving Kaylee and a missing person named Sharon Archer, who went missing on September 27th, 2021 in Kaylee's hometown of Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. Quote, Sergeant Dustin Blaker, one of the officers who would later become an investigator on Kaylee's murder case, had spoken to her over the phone. And by the way, this was on October 5th that she called. So this was a little over a week after Archer went missing. Kaylee reported that she'd seen 62-year-old Sharon Archer, whom she'd recognized from a missing persons flyer, staring at her and her boyfriend Jack as they shopped. She sent a photo of the flyer to Blaker, hoping he could investigate, but the woman was no longer inside the Walmart by the time police could respond. 3 weeks later, Sharon Archer was found drowned in a 400-acre Fernan Lake, which is in the mountains outside of Coeur d'Alene.
Coeur d'Alene police have pulled a car from the Fernan Lake, which belongs to a missing Idaho woman, Sharon Archer. They say a body was found inside. Police tell us that a person called the department to report something white off the boat docks, but it could only be seen when the sun hit it. The person saw posts on Facebook about search parties for Archer and decided to call in the object yesterday. When police arrived, they were able to locate the white 2013 Toyota Highlander about 150 feet from the shore. That car was last seen driven by Archer on September 28th. Police have not released the identity of the body found inside, and the case, including the cause of death, is still pending further investigation.
There hasn't been an update on her cause of death or anything like that, so I would assume they wrote it off as an accident or self-inflicted. What's baffling to me here is that she was actually considered an endangered missing person based on several medical conditions. This includes diabetes and brain damage from a car accident decades earlier. Therefore, this situation required a lot more urgency than it seems like it was granted. According to Blaker's report, officers responded to the Walmart to see if they could find the Toyota Highlander Archer was reported to be in. We did not find the vehicle. I had my officers check all of the hotels in town to see if she was staying at one of them. We did not find anything. I went to contact one of the managers for Walmart. I asked the manager if I could review the video surveillance camera to see if the person Kaylee reported was in fact Archer. The manager told me there was currently no one in the store who had access to the video surveillance cameras. I was given an email to send a request to someone who could access it on October 6th. I will review the video if and when we are able to get it. So MPD, did you ever follow up with that? Go back to Walmart, see if they could pull parking lot footage? No, didn't think so. Kaylee felt strongly enough that she saw the missing woman. And if they never recovered or reviewed that footage, MPD acted negligently. And it's doubtful this woman's family will never know what happened to her because, of course, Moscow PD only investigates what they want to. We all know that if Sharon is seen on that footage in Walmart, then foul play has to be considered because someone could easily place her body in the car and drive it off this little ramp here and just wait for it to be found. This actually reminds me a lot of the Kylie Rodney case, which Kaylee herself actually was really interested in. That happened in August 2022 in Truckee, California, which is actually right by Reno, which is where Bethany lives. So there's kind of connections all over the place. But Kylie was a 16-year-old girl who went missing after a high school party in the woods where there was drinking and drug use. This was at Prosser Campground in Truckee, and her body was found a couple weeks later in her SUV that was submerged in the lake right by where she went missing. Even though law enforcement had searched that very body of water a couple different times, they kind of just blamed it on visibility issues. They didn't really have an answer why it wasn't found in the couple weeks when there were so many people searching this lake. They just expected us to believe that she had been there the whole time and somehow everyone just missed her. And it seems that that's the same thing that they're suggesting in the Sharon Archer case, that nobody saw the white SUV in the lake until a couple weeks later because it was only supposedly visible when the light hit it a certain way. I actually think some of the same factors are at play here in Kylie's case with human and drug trafficking, which can really only occur if you have a complicit and corrupt local government and law enforcement, which I believe exists in Moscow, Pullman, and Truckee. On the night of the murders, there was a hit and run on WSU's campus right next to Brian Koberger's apartment. The crash occurred at the Grove Apartments, which is just next to the Steptoe Apartments where Brian lived. At 11:30 p.m. on Saturday night, 19-year-old WSU student Carmen E. Fernandez hit two pedestrians, a male and a female, as well as a fire hydrant after driving under the influence of alcohol. She fled the scene thereafter. The driver's car was allegedly found on Greek Row at Kappa Alpha Theta House, and she was found inside. She was arrested for felony vehicular assault, hit and run, and DUI. The author of While Idaho Slept described this as a much more involved scene than I had previously thought, and definitely changes my perspective of what was going on by the apartments on the very night in question. So let me read to you how the author describes this event. Quote, at approximately 11:40 p.m., a 19-year-old Kappa Delta sorority member with a high blood alcohol level with her sister and her sister's friend in the car lost control and drove into a fire hydrant, a street light, and two pedestrians, both of them badly injured. The girl then drove away from the bloody scene. Tenants at the complex where the accident occurred could hear the screams. The victims, reportedly students at WSU, lay scattered like broken tree limbs. It was horrifying, a 26-year-old witness told reporters. The Washington State University police arrived soon after, along with deputies from the Whitman County Sheriff's Office. The hydrant collision had caused a water line to rupture, and that it had to be dealt with as well. The two victims were taken to Pullman Regional Hospital in serious condition. Police began an all-hands-on-deck manhunt for the driver. According to Brian Koberger's cell phone records, he was in his apartment when the crash occurred, the flashing police lights soon lassoing across the exterior walls of nearby buildings. There had been a large police presence while he was at home. The crime scene had to be managed and streets cordoned off, and several squad cars patrolled the area looking for the perpetrator of the hit and run. Paramedics and the fire department had also arrived. This was a big scene. The scene was active until shortly after 5:30 a.m. Did you hear that? This was an active crime scene that was still being cleaned up when Koberger returned, allegedly. First responders had blocked the most direct point of egress from Koberger's apartment unit. The remaining route to any main thoroughfare required 4 turns on residential streets with 4 speed bumps as opposed to the single turn and a single speed bump Koberger's route usually required. There's even a quote from a Jose Mercado, a student who could see both Koberger's building and the accident scene from his apartment. He said, quote, "The police were there the whole time," end quote. So Brian would have had to exit and enter this cordoned off crime scene. I'd like to know if there's any body cam or dash cam footage that would have corroborated his phone pings coming back and leaving the apartment. I think that this actually helps his case in a couple ways. First, depending on the evidence, of course, that they bring in, kind of leads to the question of how he was able to sort of sneak in and out without being seen or picked up on any body cam. I also think that this may lend a little bit of credence to his alibi because there was this late night chaotic scene going down at his apartment. Perhaps he couldn't sleep and wanted to get away from the commotion, so he hopped in his Elantra and went for a drive. Hey, I think it's an easier sell to a jury with this commotion going on back at his apartment. What do you think? That's all I got for you today. So if you learned something from this video, please consider giving it a like and subscribe. Make sure your notifications are on so you get an alert when I post. I will be uploading more frequently on this case. There's just so many different little rabbit holes with this one. You know how it is. But you will be hearing from me more frequently. That's a promise. Take care of yourselves, and I will talk to you soon.